Right upon stage, Ambassador Sujan R. Chinoy, Ambassador Mr. Sanjay Kumar Varma, Ambassador Mr. Raj Srivastav, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, he's been here with us for the third consecutive year now, and Mr. Sandeep Unitin, along with Mr. Sushant Sareen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Such an honor to be here on this panel, such distinguished speakers. Without much ado, I want to start by asking Ambassador Sujan Chinoy this. Ambassador Chinoy, we saw a vision of the Indo-PACOM many years back under President Barack Obama, where this US said it was going to pivot to the Indo-Pacific, and you had the Pacific Command being renamed the Indo-PACOM. But in 2026, we are seeing a very different version of the Indo-Pacific. You have President Trump, who's speaking of enhanced focus on homeland security. He wants his Asian allies to do the heavy lifting, and he wants respectful relations with China. What does that mean for India and Japan, who are part of this great architecture called the Quad, the quadrilateral, which was one of the key visions that Prime Minister Abe had for India and Japan. India, Japan, Australia, and US. Where is the Quad? What does it mean for us in 2026?
So thank you very much, Sandeep, for that question. I want to thank Nupurji and acknowledge the presence of Arayoshi-san and my distinguished colleagues as well. You are aware that it was in President Obama's second term that the pressure was on as a result of China's sort of unbridled sway that it had acquired in the South China Sea in the noughties when the United States was focused elsewhere. That President Obama wanted to do rebalancing towards Asia, the pivot as you called it, but it was not really implemented. It was still only on paper. It was in fact President Xi Jinping, when he came to power in 2013 at the NPC, after having been elected the previous year, who actually executed a further pivot of China's towards the region. So we have seen that it was really only in President Trump 1.0 that we came around to seeing US activism with regard to the Indo-Pacific, and in quick succession we saw not only the upgradation of the Quad dialogue from a DG level dialogue to the summit level in less than 4 years, but also the renaming of PACOM to Indo-PACOM. And I remember Matt Pottinger, the then assistant to the president, also speaking of the geographic limit of the remit and limit of the Indo-Pacific as inclusive of the Western Indian Ocean. So that was Trump 1.0. But we have seen during Trump 2.0 that though his presidency began with a quick on the heels of his assuming office meeting chaired by or hosted by Marco Rubio, at which the foreign ministers of the Quad countries were invited. Despite that, we have seen that President Trump has actually been following a somewhat dichotomous policy towards the Indo-Pacific. So while not actually denying the ideation of the Indo-Pacific, he's been putting pressure on friends and foe alike with not only tariffs, but particularly in the case of allies and partners, putting pressure on them for burden sharing and enhancing their defense budgets. But I see that as the US seeks better relations with China, there is a certain apprehension across the region about the longevity of the idea of the Indo-Pacific and the Quad. And I think, therefore, this begs the question, what should the other members of the Quad do? Should we, imagine that the US is not interested? The answer to that would be that the US has not said that it's not interested. All available evidence points to its abiding interest in the Quad. But at the same time, there is no gainsaying the fact that countries like India, Japan, and Australia must strengthen their bilateral relationships and also their trilateral relationships. One good thing here is that Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's emphatic victory at the recent elections gives us hope that Japan will be and will remain a very strong bookend of the Indo-Pacific, like India is at this end. And she considers Prime Minister Abe as mentor and has already said things that sound very nationalistic. And I think she will be in a position to give a certain momentum to Japan's own, reaffirmation of, the Indo-Pacific as a concept. It's not always been very steady, if I may just add one more word there. You see, Prime Minister Abe had begun with his, confluence of the two seas way back in 2007, then came up with the Democratic Diamond, Diamond Security proposal of 2012, and finally in 2016 came up with the free and open Indo-Pacific. At that point, they had called it strategy. But Prime Minister Abe, being very pragmatic, he knew that there was a certain mutual economic interdependence with China. It was not possible for Japan to alienate China completely. He had left, to my mind, running the Japan engagement to the likes of the then Secretary General of the LDP, Mr. Toshihiro Nikai, for example, and very quietly had dropped the word strategy from FOIP. So we had seen that he was also very pragmatic about it, but he didn't give up on his essential vision of India and Japan being the two bookends of a region that was increasingly fused, one in which democracies like India and Japan, who stood together on grounds of principles and values, would together ensure that the sea lines of communication remained open, that trade and commerce was unhindered, and above all, that supply chains would remain intact. So we see that coming out of Japan, and there is still hope, notwithstanding the uncertainty at the global level and particularly US policies, that the Indo-Pacific and the Quad still has a life of its own. The proof of the pudding will be in India, Japan, and Australia settling their trade issues at an early date with the United States. If that were to happen at an early date, I would reckon that it would pave the way for the much-awaited Quad Summit. If you were to ask me, I would say that without some of the basic bilateral issues having been settled, it would be a little premature to jump into a Quad Summit in which a number of regional issues emanating from this tremendous change in US outlook remain to be settled. So this paradox still remains that the US is committed to the Indo-Pacific and the Quad, but it's saying a different thing about bringing China into the tent. By the way, we've never said that the Indo-Pacific is exclusive. Prime Minister Modi has always spoken about it as an inclusive term. So while that happens, the US has also invited a small group to be part of Pax Silica for semiconductors and AI in particular, but on a larger and broader format, the Critical Minerals Ministerial, which of course includes a very large number of countries, about 55 to 60. And so the US is doing what it can, but it's basically riding a number of horses at the same time. The emphasis being on US interests. The last thing, in my view, on President Trump's mind here is what exactly does this do for the benefit of India or Japan or the region or Australia. What he has uppermost in mind is a US-driven interest. The urgency is for US national interests.
Right, absolutely. Thank you, Ambassador Chinoy. Fascinating overview there, and you actually framed this discussion for us. But I want to bring in Dr. Anand Ranganathan on this. He's a political commentator and a scientist. A slightly different view on what you're seeing unfolding here, Dr. Ranganathan. elephant in the room, or rather the dragon in the room. You're looking at one of the largest military buildups in Asia, possibly in the last century. The only other big buildup I can think of is the Empire of Japan almost 100 years ago, and China seems to be rising to that level of militarization. Where do you see this leaving India and Japan? You know, given the fact that Prime Minister Abe and Prime Minister Modi's vision was for an open Indo-Pacific, and you have a country in the middle of it, which is very aggressive, which is taking claim to Taiwan, which is a military, which says its military rise, its rise is going to be peaceful, but it's very clearly going to be anything but. Where do you see this heading in the next 4 or 5 years? Given the fact that, you know, we always could count on the US as a backup, but now, as Ambassador Chinoy mentioned, it's USA first, so he's doing what is in his interest. Where does that leave India and Japan when you're facing a common adversary, China?
Thank you so much, Sandeep. It's not just a pleasure, it's an honor to be. Yeah, thanks very much, Sandeep, for that very probing question. First of all, thank you so much for having me here, Nupur. So always a dear friend, and so many Japanese friends out here. It's a real pleasure and an honor, so I thank you. I speak here purely in my capacity as a layman, and there are enough policy experts and diplomats on the panel to give you a much better view of the geopolitics out here. According to me, the art of diplomacy is the art of convincing a journalist that you're right. So that's where, you know, as far as I'm concerned, diplomacy begins and ends. So Sandeep, if you don't mind, I would try and tell you what I as a layman think about not just long-term future, because that's difficult to predict. As Keynes said, I don't like the long term. In the long term, we're all dead. But at least for the next 4 or 5 years, I think as a layman, what comes across to me especially over the past 6 months, is that every nation, friendly nation, must come together to discuss only one thing: how to tackle this problem of Trump. I think the next Indo-Japanese Conclave 4 has to exclusively devote time and energy to that. I think everyone has to do that. I wake up every morning and dread what next is coming from, you know, and I'm sure he wakes up in the morning, he draws the curtain and thinks, what next should I do to unsettle the world? It's crazy. You know, you had the Supreme Court come down hard on his decision, cancel out all the tariffs, and the next thing you know is he's calling all the Supreme Court judges as fools and idiots, and he immediately slapped 10% tariffs and said, I'm increasing it. Today morning, I mean, I've stopped glancing first at the Times global news in the morning because, you know, with one eye open, I look at it, and today it was, Trump says, don't even dare counter or, you know, try and be clever about the tariffs. He slapped 126% tariffs right now on. So I don't know, as a layman, for all along we believed, of course it was hypocritical all along, this so-called rules-based world, but there were rules. Yes, there was hypocrisy. Yes, there were double standards. But maybe 20 to 15, or I'm speaking like Trump now, 15% of the time, there were countries, even though they were hypocritical, they were following some rules. There was some WTO guidelines. It wasn't just the whims and fancies of one man. And whatever I say would completely be negated by, you know, the policies of America tomorrow. So when you talk about negotiating the world, when you talk about, you know, who is going to come across as somebody who's powerful, or you talked about China, for example, and, you know, Sushant is going to tell you more about, you know, how to combat China. But I really am at my wit's end. You know, according to me, you have Quad, you have, well, Hexagon is being proposed since yesterday. You have so many other, SARC, I don't know what happened to SARC, by the way. So many associations, but according to me, again, as a layman, it feels that India can be in any associations or alliances it wants. Ultimately, everything is going to be dictated for the next 2 or 3 years by Trump. I think everything is negotiable, everything is unpredictable, every alliance is going to be tested to its breaking point. I mean, we saw what happened immediately after Trump imposed those hypocritical 25% tariffs on India. You had Prime Minister Modi visit, the BRIC summit, and everyone was saying, well, here we have a counterbalance to what Trump, that hasn't materialized, Even Russia has accepted dollar as the major thing. So, to cut a very, very long story short, Sandeep, it's just absolutely unpredictable.
Absolutely unpredictable, and it's a sign of the times. Dr. Ranganathan, I never thought that we'd be talking about an unpredictable American president the way we'd be talking about an unpredictable Chinese president. The Chinese president seems to be very mature in comparison to his American counterpart. But I want to bring in Ambassador Sanjay Kumar Verma here. Ambassador Verma, a little while ago we were talking about how Indian diplomacy might seem very slow and very mature and very, it's not playing T20, right? You're playing test matches because you're playing the long game, basically. And I think you've been borne out in a lot of ways by what's happened with Canada. You didn't rise to the bait. The United States as well, you've resisted the temptation to respond to social media posts. How would you advise that the governments, India and Japan, now handle this problem? This is a very peculiar problem. This is not a situation that we ever thought that we'd be in, where your main strategic anchor of the Quad is himself very unpredictable, as Dr. Ranganathan said. You don't know what he's going to, throw open the curtains in the morning and come up with. It's almost like Alice in Wonderland, off with his head, that kind of thing. How do you think that India and Japan should handle this storm? I mean, Japan, of course, has storms of its own, and they're closer to the storm than we are.
So first of all, the gentleman we are talking about, with the curtains or without the curtains, he will have his curtain call at some point of time, so that's fine. But let's look at the gift that he has given to us. He has completely polarized the world. And on one pole, he is there. On another pole, everyone else is there. So it gives us an opportunity to have better alliances. It gives an opportunity to seek better convergences. And these convergences and alliances will be largely against the other pole. And believe it or not, even China is on the pole where we are today. So going back to Indo-Pacific, that was the main construct, I believe. Quad has already done a very powerful thing, which is to put various minds in various geographies converging together. So at the moment you have EU as having an Indo-Pacific strategy. You have ASEAN having an Indo-Pacific, whatever name they call it, outlook. So most of the geographies in the world have some focus back on Indo-Pacific, not Asia-Pacific, including Canada, which you just mentioned. So therefore, what I give the credit to the man with the curtain is that he has been able to create a convergence which will be able to last as long as he lasts. The Indo-Pacific, so there is a hard power situation wherein we need superpowers, military assets and strength there. But then there are many other things which are beyond hard power. These are innovations, these are science and technology, these are maritime issues. So there are things which are beyond that. So at least, even if the elephant is not in the room, other countries can still play on other verticals and see how the convergences could be built. Ambassador, I just talked about that there are bilateral issues and those should be resolved. That's true, and those bilateral issues always were there. This is not the first time that they have been identified. but still the partners want to converge on certain issues all over the geography, and that should take the precedence. So my brief one-sentence comment on this is, draw a larger line, the other line will automatically become smaller.
Absolutely. Draw a larger line, the other line will automatically become strong. But one quick question to what you mentioned, Ambassador, you said that this is a short-term kind of thing, right? So the alliances that you're speaking of, are they short-term alliances, alliances of convenience, or will they actually play out into long-term engagements, longer-term engagements than the tenure of just one president?
So it will be a hybrid kind of situation as I foresee. So when it comes to US's dominance in the Quad kind of a situation or entire Indo-Pacific policy, these will be transitory. But when I look at the convergence in innovation, convergence, science technology convergence in seabed, blue economy, so when I look at all these, they will be long-term implications of the grouping. So I would say it will be hybrid. And whenever US decides to come back to Quad, it would be welcome, but on the terms and conditions which other members will lay down.
Right, absolutely. I want to come to Ambassador Raj Srivastav, but first I want to bring in Sushant Sareen into this. Sushant, you've been talking about, I've actually been going back to my geometry books, checking out all this quadrilateral, trilateral, what's the latest one? Hexagon bhi hai. Hexagon mein what, six-sided? Seven, right? So 7. So India is in the middle of this. It's 6. Hexagon is 6. Pentagon is 5. Hexagon is 6. Yeah. So India is in the middle of all these constructs, right? And then there are people who are talking of a new axis of Turkey, Azerbaijan, Pakistan, and all of those countries. Where do you see India and Japan in the middle of all of these, geometrical constructs?
So Sandeep, whenever I see of all these new constructs and India being a part and parcel of it, I'm sitting with some diplomats out here. They might take umbrage to it, but I'm reminded of Oscar Wilde, who said that I will not join any club whose membership I will get. But we like to join all the clubs whose membership we'll get, so we're joining all of them. But look, the bottom line is the world has changed. And anybody who thinks that this world has changed temporarily, I think they're mistaken. We are presuming that 3 years of Trump, and 3 years is an eternity of Trump, will not be followed by Trump light or Trump heavy. I don't think we can presume that. Secondly, let us assume there's a change in administration in the United States tomorrow. I think, I understand when the US is asking its allies to do heavy lifting, but the fact of the matter remains that I don't think that attitude is going to change whenever some new administration comes in. What's broken cannot be fixed, and what's broken is very clearly before us. The question is, what do we make out of it? Now, part of the problem has been that there were such dependencies on the US, both economic as well as security, that now you have to reinvent the world to get rid of some of those dependencies. And that's not going to be easy. And I don't think enough brain power has been applied to what is going to be the new construct. How do you replace a market as big as the US? Can you even do it? And if you have another capricious, whimsical kind of a character coming into the US, then what? And right now we're just talking about the US. Who knows what might happen in China tomorrow, right? So the problem is going to be, how do countries like India and Japan and the other countries, for example, how do we traverse this? Look, I don't think we can go back to what was happening maybe in the last century, when you formed alliances and you fought for each other. I don't see India getting into any alliance and then fighting a war on behalf of somebody else because somebody else has been attacked. And I don't see anybody else doing it for India. Which means that the one thing which countries like India, Japan, and others can help each other in is developing their own capacities to deter aggression and fight the enemy. There is no other option. Again, I will say something, maybe our Japanese friends out here might not like it, but I understand the historical context, and yet the pacifist constitution, which I hope the new Prime Minister is going to change, applied so long as you had the American security umbrella. It no longer applies. Where is the guarantee that if the Chinese were to do something aggressive tomorrow, the Americans will come and stand by on Japan's back? There is no guarantee. They might say it right now, but I don't see them do it. So I think the Japanese need to build up their own military sinews, just as India needs to build it up. And frankly, India really needs to, and since you're a defense guy also, India really needs to think through, this whole business of using army as an employment opportunity, or, this infantry and armor-centric approach. The world has changed. I don't know if we are thinking of how the future of warfare has changed irrevocably, and frankly, it is going to be technology. If you are going to go after what's been happening in the past, I don't see how it's going to work. So if India, Japan, Australia, South Korea for that matter, countries which have certain synergies which they can bring in, yes, you can build up each other's capacities, help each other out, and be able to stand up to a bully without having to depend on somebody else. One final word. I think what the Americans have done, see, once the unthinkable happens, it becomes the new normal. What the Americans have done under Trump is they've done the unthinkable. This kind of a president coming into the US, a mad emperor of sorts, you were talking about tariffs. He said 10%, they then announced 15%, then they went back to 10%. As of now, I challenge anybody out here in this hall, where I assume there are people from the business community, if you can tell me what exactly are the tariffs today. I don't think anybody knows. And how do you do business in such an environment? So, where the Americans have screwed up, and pardon my French on that, is that, look, if you are the big power, there are two things you give people. One is economic cooperation or security benefits, and the second is a security umbrella. The Americans have denied you both. And they are actually, and again, pardon my French, because there is no other better word of putting it, the Americans are shitting on their friends and sucking up to their enemies. Make sense of it how you will.
That's a good way of putting it, and I'm actually going to look at another way. I'm going to ask Ambassador Raj Srivastav this question. What Sushant said, I'll put it in a different language, diplomatic language, which is what we...
Yeah, I used to think I am not diplomatic, but...
Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada said that at Davos, where he said that if you're not on the table, you're on the menu. I think that pretty much sums up the world of today in 2026. As the Dean of the Sushma Swaraj Institute, have you had to revise a lot of your syllabus? And, because the foreign policy, this is not the kind of predictable foreign policy that we thought. What's the kind of world that we're heading into? How do you see it from your perspective there at the academic end of things?
Thank you, Sandeep. So first of all, let me congratulate Nupur for organizing this conference, and especially personally for me. We say that in a mission, you cannot have two ambassadors at the same time. And that was the case that I had my first half of Japan hosting Ambassador Chinoy as my ambassador, and second half Ambassador Sanjay Kumar Verma. And Nupur has put the both of them together with me on this platform, which is something impossible for foreign, like Ministry of External Affairs to do. So thank you so much. It's a privilege to be in a platform where I have two former bosses, one after another, sitting together. I take a lot of guidance from them, so it's very happy to be here. Your question about Sushma Swaraj Institute of Foreign Service training curriculum and how in this change of continuous change, which just yesterday, day before yesterday, Dr. Jaishankar defined that we are living in a time where change percentage is more than the continuity. And you should be aware that we are accustomed to live in the habitual world. That habit has to change, that you have to be progressive learner. Every day you should wake up that what should I learn today new, so that by the time I sleep, I should satisfy the day ending. And that's the philosophy of the Institute today. Progressive learning, learning technology, understanding how to use AI to become smarter so that mundane of your work can be done by AI and you can focus on things like understanding Mr. Trump. Okay. Now, the point about we are celebrating the two visionary leaders, Prime Minister Abe and Prime Minister Modi. And in that context, I think the uncertainty that we are being provided to, those leadership visions are very important. Every meeting that they took that happened in, say, Varanasi or in base of Mount Fuji, the whole idea of those meetings was not the diplomatic protocol, it was a spiritual protocol. Serenity, silence, sublime. Those were the terms that we used for those meetings. And that's why the outcomes between India and Japan has been transformational. You know, you need to build the trust. Trust is the basis of transformation. And this partnership, because of the two leaders which are there on the screen, has become irreversible. This will remain a partnership which will define the global peace, prosperity, planet, and people that was told by Mr. Amitabh Kant. So I have no doubt that despite the noise that we hear, the noise may remain, but the vibration that has been established by leaders like Prime Minister Abe will be very defining feature of making peace in this world. In our institute, what we have done is change the technology. That means our institute in last 1.5 years has become paperless, so that it has become more efficient. Secondly, it has become more experiential learning. We do not do lectures for the sake of lectures. We create these kind of ideas where they do the crisis simulation. The idea is that you need to be preparing for the crisis in calm time so that when the crisis happens, you become calm. And I think that's the highlight of the leadership of today in India. I remember that particular scene when Operation Sindoor was happening, where all the important leaders were shown on television. There was no tea cup on the table. That is the strategic communication to the population of the country, that leadership is totally under control and they are calm in crisis. I think that is the kind of crisis we are going through and will go through continuously. India's rise will not be the rise as China's rise had been. We should be prepared for that kind of journey where your rise is assured. We will become Viksit Bharat, definitely, because our economy is internal strength. We are becoming Atmanirbhar. But in that rise, don't expect the help coming from abroad, from any corner. Corners like Japan and Australia are few, but the point is that we need to continuously build on that so that there is a mutually beneficial partnership. Look at what has happened in EU-India partnership. This year has been India-EU so far. Everything that has happened in this country has been EU-focused. AI Impact Summit, you had 21 leaders, 11 were European Union leaders. This journey of India-EU partnership has happened because of the turbulence in the world. We have been working on it for last 15 years, but suddenly in last 3 years, it all has fructified. So you should see the half glass fill also. There is not that empty side should be the focus. Thank you.
That's a very good insight, you know. I'm going to go back to those photographs of Sindoor to just check those things. The teacups missing from the pictures. I never thought of that. It's a fascinating insight there. But you were talking about noise, vibration, and I was straight away thinking about military platforms. The Japanese make the quietest submarines, some of the most advanced fighter jets. They have their own jet engines, the most advanced warships. Each of their warships, the Congo class, and I think the successor ones, they carry over 120 missiles. Our Delhi class in comparison have got just 20 or 30. They make cutting-edge military platforms. Ambassador Sujan Chinoy, but when it comes to transfer of technology, collaboration with India, Japan does not even come on to the table to even transfer CNC machines. That's how, pacifist the constitution is. As Sushant was mentioning, that the pacifist constitution of Japan could be an impediment, you think, in pursuing this defense relationship between India and Japan?
Not really. I think there are some structural issues here as well. Now, India and Japan have both created the right framework of foundational agreements, including deepening naval cooperation, including, for example, logistics and cross-servicing. And we have a spectrum of engagements transcending all the three services. The army and the ground forces of Japan, for example, have the Dharma Guardian exercises, which started when I was ambassador there. I know what it took to convince the Japanese side to actually engage even in a platoon level exercise, for they'd never done it between ground forces with any other country except the United States, if that. Between the Air Force, we have subsequently started the Veer Guardian exercises. Navy to Navy cooperation straddles essentially three points of connect. One is the bilateral GMEX, the Japan-India joint exercises, which had lain dormant for a while. Around 2012, they had ceased to exist, and then they were revived once again 5 years later when I was ambassador. Then we also have engagement in the context of the Malabar, which is the flip side of the coin as far as the quadrilateral security dialogue is concerned. And then you have the multinational Milan exercises. In all these, Japan is engaged. And there is a 2+2 dialogue as well now. So the question that you've thrown up is quite legitimate, that when India has actually been the world's largest importer of arms over the last decade, if not more, even though now we are veering towards Atmanirbhar Bharat in defense manufacturing, why is it that Japan has not emerged as a big player? Japan, firstly, has a history that does not permit it to, take any credit for being some kind of an exporter of defense equipment. They are loath to project that image, and around 2013, they did review their defense export control system, permitting certain types of exports, etc., in keeping with the changing times. Earlier, they did this only for the avionics part of the F-16s for the United States. Then they did try to do a submarine deal with Australia and failed. There are, after, of course, the French came in and they also failed. So there were two failures in a row as far as Australia was concerned. But the point here is that the Japanese are not used to the rough and tumble of defense tendering. The arms market globally, which is highly competitive, which is quite murky in that sense in terms of competition. The GE is pitted with the Rolls Royces and what have you, the Raytheons, and so Japan is completely like a babe in the woods as far as this is concerned. They, when they started, also preferred only G to G, and the world doesn't work always on G to G, and so we have to see how to encourage Japan to actually participate in India's acquisition, defense procurement, and go beyond simply having some agreement between ATLA and DRDO for collaboration on, robotic technologies or remote controlled ground vehicles. Now we have this cooperation in the naval sector on the Unicorn, which is a mast used by the Navy. But recently I was in Bangalore visiting a large number of defense startups, and that's a vibrant cluster, as you know, better than I do, that there are companies that need, for example, carbon fiber as a material. It's a dual-use product, and one of the world's biggest producers is Toray of Japan. And there's no Indian company that is on the entities list or sanctioned list at all. And yet, even as we are able to procure Japanese Toray-made carbon fiber through the UK and Australia, sometimes it is Torre that says we cannot sell it to India. Now, I think that doesn't gel well with the fact that we have a special strategic and global partnership and that we are talking about deepening our defense cooperation. And Japan, like a chrysalis, wants to also become a butterfly in the Indo-Pacific, being able to, demonstrate the full, potential of its agency. So we have to basically spread the word through MOFA in Japan, through METI, and convene meetings to convince them to do more with a strategic partner like India. And I think the door is opened up because of our Atmanirbhar policies. There is a vast number of MSMEs in Japan that have niche area technologies. The next generation doesn't want to inherit that business venture from their parents. They all want to retire and lead the quiet pacifist life. The Japanese are good people. They don't want war. But this is the reality of life. So how do we get the Japanese MSMEs also to come to India? We will have to do the hand-holding. We cannot afford to let fly-by-night operators link up with them. For one bad experience with the Japanese companies, enough to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. So there should always be positive experiences so that by word of mouth, the MSMEs go back and speak of their great experience in India. And we must bring them in on dual technologies. If there is IP as a matter of concern, then let us work out a framework for that as well. If there is a chance to acquire some, monozukuri and kaizen and some, just-in-time and many other principles from Japanese manufacturing, particularly their shop floor production skills, etc., then these may be acquired by us. But I think the Japanese government will also have to do much more on this front. And I keep telling them all the time that this is a lacuna. This is a gap, that we have such great relations and you have companies not willing to sell their products to India, where the United States, France, Israel, you name it, the UK and others are quite willing to sell us in exchange for top dollar.
Right. Absolutely, and there are contracts where the Japanese companies who are leaders in their technology fields don't even respond to the request for information. That's how distant they are when it comes to arms sales to India. But Dr. Ranganathan, you believe there's a way around this? Can we have a relationship? Can we have a special strategic global partnership with Japan and yet not have any joint venture, co-development, whether it's a sixth generation fighter aircraft or a submarine or anything? Is there a way around this conundrum?
That's a great question. There is a way around if we, rather than jump to the table, and I speak we as India, we sit at the table. I think respect is earned. We really have to start believing that. We've come a long way from ambassador cars and Campa Colas, and when the respected ambassadors talked about, yes, we will get there to Viksit Bharat or developed India in 2047. I think we will get there if we are able to learn from a nation like Japan that has rebuilt itself again and again. The lesson there is that rather than asking the world to reform for us, we have to reform for the world. Now, I'll give you a very tiny example. In the last 5 years, India has signed 8 FTAs, free trade agreements, with either entities or nations. Essentially, we've opened ourselves to the world, which is a great thing. Yes, in a limited way, the world has opened itself to us as well. But there is no point in us opening ourselves to the world if we do not carry out the kind of reforms that are needed at breakneck speeds to make us competitive. So there would be hundreds of products that are not going to have any tariffs or duties, and we don't have enough capabilities inside to compete with the quality of those products. And I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole of this, the demigod status that we've given the sector of agriculture that employs almost 300 million Indians. That's almost 46% of our active labor force. In the West, not more than 2% of the active labor force is employed in agriculture. Even in developing countries or vying to become developed, it's not more than 3.5%, 4%. Out here, 44 to 46% of our labor force is involved in a sector that is contributing only 13.5 to 14% of the GDP. This is unsustainable. You cannot become a developed country if you do not bring adaptability or flexibility to this sector. We simply do not have that political will to do it. Now, yes, do we want Japan to help us in this? Sure we do. But then Japan is going to think, well, what's the point if you haven't reformed? You know, we look at, for example, one of the greatest statements to be made by that endeared me to our Prime Minister was when he said something in 2013, which was that government has no business to be in business. And I said, well, finally we have someone who's thought it through. And he repeated that in 2019, 2021, but unfortunately the last 11 years, all what his government has done is to be in the business of running businesses. 21% of our annual allocated budget goes in propping up public sector units. There are 1,830 of them, 400 of them are non-functional. What do we want Japan to do? We have the sitting Air Force chief, you know, and as diplomatic a language as he can use, you know, Sandeep, being, you know, castigating towards why Tejas isn't at the stage where we want it to be after 40 years, you know. So we have to look inwards. And I think, yes, first time round I talked about Trump, but yes, we can look the bully in the eye, but like China did. I mean, Trump imposed 150% tariffs on China. China imposed 150% tariffs back next day. And next thing you know is the third day, Trump reduced the tariffs to 35%. Have we introduced, now here we have a slight variance with Sushantji because he's gone like Trump. He's not gone completely like Trump rogue, but he's become increasingly very transactional, you know, and that's a pity because what I love about Japan is they are to the T a rules-based society, you know, they uphold morality and ethics in whatever they do. I'm afraid you can't deal with Trump like that at all. You know, somebody has to stand up to the bully. If India is not doing it, I mean, you know, slight, again, variance, not disagreement, because you never disagree with the Punjabi if you want your face to be, you know, this thing. So you can, as diplomatically say, slight variance with Sushant. For example, you know, the Indo-US trade deal. Now, of course, the language has been changed from India commits $500 billion in the next 5 years to India intends to. That happened backdoor, that's good. But please remember, we don't have a similar lock-in clause with any of the 8 nations or entities we've done FTA with. Why with Trump? And, you know, as that rogue Kissinger said, to have America as an enemy is dangerous, but to have America as a friend is fatal. If we commit ourselves to, for example, you know, stop buying Russian oil, or it's either oil or turmoil. We got to choose. And I think we really need to stand up. I'm fed up of, you know, us being transactional all the time. And I'm sure I'm going to get my pound of scolding from Pazi, but I'm prepared for it.
Right, and you can actually follow their debate, discussion, discourse, disagreements on Twitter. It's a very fascinating thread that they've had going for the last couple of weeks. But, you know, I want to come back to Ambassador Verma on this point of, and I'm sure this is something that you've dealt with while you were there in Tokyo, the fact that Japan does not respond to Indian defense requests. How do you steer this relationship when there is absolutely no buy-in into the Indian defense system? You have Prime Minister Modi in Israel. There's talk of a very interesting strategic framework that both countries are working on to bring their 2 military-industrial complexes together. What do you propose that India and Japan do to take this forward?
So the structural issue were already discussed. Japan being pacifist, Japanese constitution does not allow the defense exports to that extent. But let's come back to the drawing board. There is a buyer, which is us, Where is the seller? Japan doesn't want to sell you. So if there is no seller, there will be no trade. That is one. Secondly, if you look at the Japanese defense product makers, most of them are large conglomerates, which has got defense as one of the verticals. And if you ask them, what is the revenue share by those defense verticals, it will be below 10%. They are not interested. Third, those production units do not have capacity to supply you. So let's look at Japan. Let's see if they have capacity to deliver. They do not. They have excellent technologies. They don't have the capacity to deliver to the scale that we want. Co-development was one of the issues which was talked about. They will be willing to do co-development, provided we provide an ecosystem where the co-development will be feasible and it will be beneficial to both the Japanese ecosystem and the Indian ecosystem. Unfortunately, that has not been seen so far. And finally, from the point of view of tripping the defense products via UK or Australia was mentioned. See, defense, the end users licensing agreement are very, very strict. And no one wants to burn the fingers. In case of, since Japan largely produces the American platforms, so till the time US does not say that you have Indian market for the same platforms and products that we have asked you to develop and produce, they will never be able to do. So capacity is the main issue for the Japanese companies. And I had visited some of them. And when this was discussed that you don't even come for the RFP, they said, we are not interested. So that is the main issue.
Right, we're not interested. That's a big issue indeed. And, I was talking to one of the very respected defense analysts, Lieutenant General Shankar, and he mentioned that this thing of ecosystem that you spoke of, he mentioned that we need something like this that we did with Maruti Suzuki. That was a turning point which actually sparked off India's automobile revolution. With, 1983 onwards, 4 decades now, India is one of the world's largest automobile markets. We've not had a similar investment from any other foreign country that's come in over here and set up this kind of thing. Say for aircraft, Sushant, Anand was talking about the Air Force and HAL quibble about fighter jets not coming on time. Do you think that, Sushant, this is something that Japan could actually help with come in? As Ambassador Verma mentioned, there are issues. They have capacity constraints. There is the United States there, of course. Is there some other way that we can work around this by getting the Japanese to come in here and, say, set up production lines in India?
Yeah, but that does not depend only on the Japanese, doesn't it? It depends on India as well. And if you have a government which says HAL is the best thing which happened to India, what do you do after that? If you have ordnance factories which are still in, 19th century probably?
Early 20th.
Early 20th? Okay. Does it take a rocket scientist for us to figure this out? And if this government, which I think has done some fabulous work, if this government cannot call the bluff of these trade unions and these public sector unit types and kick some backsides as far as HAL is concerned, then who will do it? So the point is that we can't shove everything onto the Japs and say, okay, look, please come give us technology. Nobody will give us technology. Nobody gave us technology even for Maruti. Sure. They developed vendors. Yeah. And that was a fabulous model because that created that ecosystem. There was a lot of hard work which was put in by Indian industry. So we must give credit to Indian industry for stepping up to the plate and then moving on from there. Now, something like that can certainly work out. But if you want that, and this is, again, I'm sitting in the middle of people who are from government, everything is about give us technology. Why should anybody give us technology here? Either you steal the technology, or you develop it, or you buy it. There is no other way of getting technology. I don't know why we just keep on and on and on about please give us technology transfer. Nobody is going to give us technology. They'll give us technology which is worth nothing to nobody. If you want really good cutting edge technology, you either develop it or steal it. Okay? or co-develop it, if at all that's possible. So let's not talk about everywhere we go. I'm sick of it. I just tune off. I tune off when somebody mentions gender to me, and I tune off when somebody mentions technology transfer to me. Because it's not going to happen. So I think, we can keep talking about, there would be, look, there will always be constraints. There will be legal constraints, there will be alliance constraints, there will always be constraints, but for every constraint, there is a workaround. The question is that the workaround will only work if you want it to work. But if you are going to go and sing praises of HAL, which has not delivered a damn thing in so many years, and everything is going to depend upon things which don't work in India, and we expect that the Japs will come and bail us out or somebody else will, and that's not going to happen. So I think let's get real. Finally, it's all very well, and I agree with Ambassador Chenoy that the Japanese are very good people, and all the other attributes, the spirituality and everything. But let's be real. Pacifism does not prevent war, right? And war does not spare good people. In fact, war comes first to good people and then to bad people. So it's better to be a bad person and prevent war than to be a good person and invite war.
You want to come in on that, ambassadors?
Because you're talking about defense, and my ears pricked up a bit. So now, all that you say about HAL and others, there's some truth in that. There's been changes of late with regard to the ordnance factories with which you are familiar. But truth to tell, as far as AMCA Mark I is concerned, the government has actually kept HAL out of it, and it's gone to the private sector. So it's not as if government is not aware of some of the intrinsic
building
constraints.
up a second backup
Exactly,
to helicopters, fighter jets, everything.
That's right. I mean, for helicopters, we are still embedded in HAL with Safran, this HAL consortium that will make the engine for our helicopters. But what India really needs is propulsion systems. From the Navy to tanks, whether it's the Arjun MBT, where the 1500 horsepower engine is, embedded, or to the fighter aircraft, the LCA, where for the next 50 years we are going to be dependent on a supply chain coming out from the United States of America. That's the life of that platform. If you go by the life of the MiG-21, then you're looking at 30 to 50 years, whatever upgrades you do. So here the problem is that India has the capacity to build a lot, but there are certain propulsion systems, such as the ones that we require for our aircraft, fighter aircraft engine, or the destroyers, where you have engines coming from Ukraine, if not from Russia, or the tanks, where it's a German technology, and at the nuclear side we have done well. As the SSBNs go, the Arihat, the Arihant, Arigat, and Aridaman, the nuclear power reactor is going to be indigenous. But otherwise, the propulsion systems for naval, craft are not available. Now, that's where Japan, I feel, on the naval side, could come in. On the aircraft side, there is a thought that occurs to me that they've agreed, for example, to go in for co-development of a 6th generation fighter aircraft with the UK and Italy. But would they do that with India? I would say no, because there is a question of strategic autonomy in defense here also. I'm sorry to say this, but it's not as if the Japanese can take a decision on such critical and sensitive matters without a by your leave coming from other quarters like Washington. So it's not as if the Japanese may not want to do more with India, but they are embedded themselves in the G7. They are an alliance partner of the treaty alliance partner going back to 1960 with the United States. So they have so much happening in their part of the world where they need the US, in the East China Sea. So they have to consult them. So we should try to encourage them to do more, but we have to be realistic also. There are certain limits. Can I just say one quick word? Sorry, I'm taking a little more time, but you know, the US has not entirely abandoned Japan. Japan is not entirely on its own yet, because if you read carefully the National Security Strategy 2025, the National Defense Strategy 2026, and more particularly, the State Department's agency fiscal plan 2026-2030, you find that overall, the thrust is still on regarding China as an adversary in the Indo-Pacific. They have said it fewer times in the NSS and NDS, and they've said it more times in the State Department fiscal plan. But the whole point here is that China is a long-term adversary, and the US is determined to deter through strength. They don't want to dominate, but that's another way of putting it, that you deter through strength. And this whole strengthening of the maritime domain there, such that the Chinese are hemmed in within the first island chain, that should be like music to Japan's ears, that they won't have to do all the heavy lifting themselves, you know, as the Chinese submarines try to pass through the Japanese islands, the various straits, without even surfacing or doing the courtesy of surfacing. That now you have the US actually trying to do a strategy that I last saw in World War II, when they fought their way up through Mariana, up to
Island hopping
island hopping to Guam, and then to Saipan, and then using their B-29 super fortresses against Japan. I mean, that's the kind of attention that has come to the first island chain. That should be very good news for Japan.
Right. So we are almost at the end of this very fascinating discussion. I wish we could go on for another hour, but I have Nupur looking at me from there, from the audience. Nupur, we have what, 5 minutes? Can we take audience questions as well? Right. So, so before that, no, we don't have time. We are between you and lunch. So I want to bring in Ambassador Srivastav. What is the one tangible outcome that you would like to see between India and Japan to take this Modi-Abe vision forward over the next couple of years? What's a low-hanging fruit to your mind? You've served there in Japan. You know what it's like.
Yeah. So I mentioned about the serenity part, the spirituality part of the two leaders. There's one part which both the leaders have common, which is not yet talked too much about. Both of them are forward-looking in terms of future technologies. So I remember every year in the first month of January, there are continuous everyday New Year receptions by different associations. There was one new association called Association of Companies of New Economies. And Ambassador Chinoy sent me there that you represent me. And I went there and I saw a lot of murmur there. So I said, what's happening? He said, Prime Minister Abe is coming. I said, does he come to this kind of, he said, he won't go to anywhere else, but he'll come for this one. I said, why? Because he said he wants to promote the startup culture in Japan. And this is 2018. Now, look at India-Japan Digital Partnership that we established in 2018. Now 2.0 version has been signed in the 10-year roadmap. I would see that the technology at the level of people, at the level of startups, is going to be the defining feature, which has not yet taken place in a big way between India and Japan. I was in December, first week, in Indian Institute of Science. They organize every year, alternatively, India-Japan Science and Technology Innovation Forum. This time, there were 30 startups from India who have got funding of some kind from India-Japan Consortium. And the kind of project they are doing is mind-boggling. I'm an engineer, so when I could analyze that, what kind of work they are doing. For example, piezoelectricity from the punching of the keyboards. And the name is given E, electronic, K-E-Y, key, the keys, and gai, ikigai, which is Japanese word. So a lot of innovation happening both in terms of narrative building, but also harnessing technology at the level of grassroots. I think that demographic complementarity that is there between India and Japan can only happen when this technology start happening, diffusion at the level of people. And that's happening, which is changing from the time that we were there and now. So I think that will make sure that the ecosystem talks to us, each other much better, because it will be bottom up, not just top down.
Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Srivastava. I want to open the floor up for questions.
Hi, everyone. I have a question for you. I think Well, the discussion's amazing, but I think we're selling ourselves short as a country. As Sushant says, we always say, give us technology transfer. Why don't we see it the other way around, right? Because as we saw in the Ukraine war and the Israel-Gaza war, if you launch 10,000 rockets on another country, you can fail the entire air defense system, right? And India can sell maybe dumb missiles to advanced countries for a cheaper cost. That is something that can be done. On this Republic Day, we unveiled a hypersonic Mach 10 missile. Now, only 3 countries have that: India, China, and Russia. US doesn't have it, Europe doesn't have it. So why is that conversation not being a part of defense agreements or sales of defense from India to Japan and other countries? Thank you very much.
Look, I completely agree with you. But there are, of course, it's not that India is, some small little country somewhere which doesn't count. There are huge things that we bring to the table. It's not, again, one of my grouses. We keep talking about the size of the Indian market, and then you close it. Thank God the government is starting to get into these free trade agreements. How else do you leverage your market? You can't say that I have the largest middle class in the world, and then you say, but sorry, it's close to you. How stupid is that? Don't these people even think what they're talking about? So the point is that it's good we are opening up, and I agree with you. And missiles is one thing. There are a number of other technologies that we can bring to bear which actually help in other countries. So which is the point I was making initially. The point is that, look, if countries are going to depend upon the United States or Russia or China or whatever else, the world is changing. You can't depend upon anyone anymore, right? So countries which are, I would call, middle powers need to cooperate with each other so that we can build up each other's capacities so that each country can defend itself much better without having to depend upon somebody else, because that dependence may or may not happen. They might leave you in the lurch. So yes, you've come up with this thing that we can talk in terms of the missile technology, but number of other technologies also where there can be a lot of to and froing between countries like India, Japan, Australia, a number of other places.
I'd just like to I'd just like to add to what Dr. Sareen has said. You need to understand that India has done very well in recent years on defense technologies as well. We have some great success stories, and Sandeep here is an expert on these things, and he can say more on it. But for example, we have the advanced towed artillery gun now, which is a fantastic piece of equipment being made today by both Kalyani Systems as well as Tata Advanced Systems Limited. TASL is also making it. We have the Pinaka rocket system, and recently during Operation Sindoor, you've seen that a number of our air defense systems have excelled. We are also making propulsion systems. It's not as if we are not making propulsion systems. I was just mentioning a while ago that as far as our SSBNs are concerned, we are actually making the nuclear reactor in India. The propulsion system of the INS Vikrant is by and large indigenous. But when it comes to the destroyers, the Kolkata class destroyers, when it comes to some of the other cruisers, etc., you might find that we have propulsion systems coming from elsewhere, the biggest gap being the fighter aircraft engine. So we've got a number of things we are exporting now to countries like France, to Israel, to Armenia. And I would therefore say that when you speak of a certain technology that DRDO and others have mastered, say at Mach 10, it should not lead to an immediate swag. Like we have to be conscious that there are areas where we are doing well and there are areas we'll have to continue to work. That's a technology demonstrator. There's a big gap between demonstrating that technology and actually implementing it for mass production and exports. Right now, I think we are at about $2.7 billion worth of exports. That's around 24,000 crores. You know our target is for 50,000 crores. So we will get there. And there are, many countries around the world that are interested in our equipment. But we will first have to meet the requirements of our armed forces. So therefore, when people talk about exporting the Tejas, I would say, hold your horses. We've just added one line to make 8 more aircraft in Pune, so that you can have a total of 16 plus 8, 24, 16 in HAL in Bangalore and 8 out of their line in Pune. And then, meet some of the constraints that have been cited by Air Chief Marshal AP Singh. First, we have to look at our own requirements. Then we will see what we can export. And we're doing good on ammo also, ammunition.
Right. Anand?
No, just to add to that, I think we possibly, again as a layman, we're looking at it from a different lens. Let me change the perspective a little. All of us are, I think, talking about transfer of technology or importing, exporting technology as far as the defense of a country is concerned. We end up spending hundreds of billions of dollars in buying aircrafts and aircraft carriers. I think to a layman, I believe very rarely would we find going into the future an all-out war between nations, or let's put it this way, like a world war, existential war. We're going to have skirmishes that may erupt into something a little bit major, but essentially we're going to have a tit-for-tat Operation Sindoor kind of thing. You flex your muscle, let me see how good you are, that kind of a thing. In that scenario, let's be very honest, the technology that we import or export is constantly evolving. It's like a living being. It's almost like under Darwinian evolution. What you've produced today is perhaps Nokia that's going to sell 90% of the mobile phones, but that's year 2000. The company is a dodo now. The same goes with any technology. And let me shift the lens now. What is important is our collaboration in something that I'm going to pose a question to the audience. According to you, which is the greatest threat that we have faced in the last decade? Can you tell me?
Yeah, it's SARS COVID-19.
Exactly. Thank you, Shailja. 25 million people died. Did India or did Japan bring out a vaccine in the first month, first 2 months, first 3 months, first 4 months? No. That's a very sobering answer. We as Indians used to call ourselves as the world hub for vaccines. On 12th of January 2020, China published the SARS-CoV-2 genome. On 13th of January, Moderna, an American company, had applied for a patent and entered phase 1 clinical trials. We gave the cultured virus in June to Bharat Biotech. The vaccines were made available next year. Millions of lives could have been saved in India, abroad, had we or Japan, or this is what I want the collaboration to be in, rather selling an aircraft carrier that may or may not come in use. Yes, it's important. But the real existential threat came not from a war between two nations. It came from a virus.
We've been talking about the pacifist Japanese constitution, but Takaichi-san has been elected on a platform of abandoning that. She has a 75% majority in the lower house, the Diet. I think it's only a matter of time before she does something in the upper house. So she is about to completely alter this approach, and military potential is what she wants to build up. She wants to abandon the idea of self-defense forces, and military-related, defense-related exports are going to be an important part of her agenda, as far as she said before the election, during the election. So why are we still talking about the Japan of the past, which was based on the 1951 Constitution?
Right. Yep. That's a great thought there, and I think that's all we have time for. Thank you very much. Hopefully there will be a vaccine for pacifism, and Sushant would be delighted with that. as you mentioned, the Prime Minister's new mandate is to revise that.
See, pacifism is a luxury you can afford if there's somebody guaranteeing your security. Otherwise, there is no question of any pacifism. Can India be a pacifist country? It's not going to happen.
discussion today is
It's
about
not possible. And when we were a kind of semi-pacifist country, we were getting, slapped from all corners. I would rather not be
Not
a pacifist.
pacifist. We are not pacifist.
We should
Japan,
not be.
we are saying, and the panel
Thank
has been
God for
talking
that.
about Japan being pacifist. But we now have a prime minister, Abe-san also wanted to abandon the constitution. She now has the mandate. She has 75% of the seats in the lower house with the Japan Innovation Party. So she has the mandate to abandon pacifism and go towards being a much more of a military or a normal country, as Abe-san put it.
We'll wait for that to happen, and but that's all we have time for. Thank you very much. We look forward to that indeed. Thank you very much. What a enlightening discussion this has been. I mean, you've just heard it from the stalwarts themselves, and with that, I hand it back to Nupur. Nupur, please take. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please give them a big hand. Thank you.
I'd now like to first request Mr. Prasenjit Basu to please come up on the stage to felicitate our 3 ambassadors first. Can I please invite upon stage Mr. Sharad Bhattirapad to felicitate our other 3 panelists.